We're all here today for Pairing Pages Wine and Literary Event. I'm Jill Barth. I'm a Chicago-based wine writer and contributor to Forbes, USA Today, wine enthusiast, and dozens of other publications around the world. I write about wine made pretty much anywhere they make wine. I'm probably hoping to cover it or have gotten a chance to cover it. And so I travel the world, taste thousands of bottles a year, and try to understand the places and the people where they're made, and then help people find bottles that fit into their lives. So a big part of what I do is...
How did you get this wonderful job?
Well, I'm a writer myself, obviously. I've been a lifelong writer. I also kind of came through it through the fiction route and ended up falling in love with wine when I was young, kind of chipping away at learning about it. And then I did a bunch of research on winemakers in the south of France. And because I'd done all this research for actually fiction, I ended up taking interviews and pitching them around to different publications, and it worked, it stuck. And so that's how it got started. So really, I have books and writing and just passion to thank for it, for getting a few good opportunities. So
oh, that's fantastic. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so we probably all have a few things in common here, a love of books and probably wine and traveling for most of us. Seems like that's kind of the good things we all seek to do with our
Those are like the top three. Those are the
top
three, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And, so the reason why we're here is because we've got the #1 New York Times bestselling author, Susan Wiggs. We've got her lovely home and her bottle of champagne, or a bottle of decoy bubbly. We've got her dog. So we're here to talk about books, but we've gotten a good background so far. And, I read that your books have been translated into 20 languages and have been made available in 30 countries, which is really phenomenal. And I was reading up on a bit of like the overall theme for your books. And one of the things that I pulled out that I thought was really interesting is it was that your books celebrate the power of love, timeless bonds of family, and the fascinating nuances of human nature, which I think are just a beautiful thing to get to celebrate here today. And I know everyone's really excited about your books and to share what they thought about them. So just a little bit of history, or a little bit of background for everybody that's joining us or will be listening to this. So Tandem Collective ran a Susan Wiggs audio campaign on behalf of HarperCollins US, and 45 audio fans based in the United States got the opportunity to listen to 3 of Susan's most popular backlist titles. And today we have 3 of them joining us. We have Krystal, Tiffany, and Michelle. So thank you so much. It's nice to have you here. And we have 3 wines, and we'll talk about those after we get into the books. We'll talk about those a little bit more. These are from Duckhorn Vineyards and the Duckhorn portfolio. Honestly, this is some of the most impressive wines in North America and elsewhere. They have such a fine reputation. And we're really lucky to get to have 3 different wines from different places with different kind of styles here with us today. So we'll talk about those a little bit as kind of a panel. Everybody can share their thoughts about the books. So I think we should start there. So we'll start with the Tandem participants who got a chance to listen, and they can give us all a little bit of sneak peek of our thoughts. So I thought we could start Krystal, Tiffany, and then Michelle, if that works for you. So Krystal, you want to start us off?
Sure. Okay. So I had the privilege of reading the Oysterville Sewing Circle, and this was actually it was actually my first book that I was able to read, yours, Susan, and I absolutely adored it. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. So the description, I'm pulling, because we had the audio, I don't have it, so I'm pulling it up from Goodreads. So if there's anything else that I've maybe read wrong or to add, let me know. At the break of dawn, Carolyn Shelby rolls into Oysterville, Washington, a tiny hamlet at the edge of the raging Pacific. She's come home to a place she thought she left forever, home of her heart and memories, but not her future. 10 years ago, Carolyn launched a career in the glamorous fashion world of Manhattan, but her success in New York imploded in a wave of scandal and tragedy, forcing her to flee the only safe place she knows. And in the backseat of Carolyn's car are 2 children who are orphaned in a single chilling moment, 5-year-old Addie and 6-year-old Flick. She's now their legal guardian, a role she's not sure she's ready for. But the Oysterville she's left behind has changed. Her siblings have their own complicated lives, and her aging parents are hoping to pass on their thriving seafood restaurant to the next generation. And there is Will Jensen, a decorated Navy SEAL who's also returned home after being wounded overseas. Will and Carolyn were forever friends as children with the promise of something more, until he fell in love with Sierra, Carolyn's best friend and the most beautiful girl in town. With her modeling jobs drying up, Sierra too is on the cusp of reinventing herself. Carolyn returns to her favorite, the sewing shop owned by Mrs. Lindy Bloom, the woman who inspired her and taught her to sew. There, she discovers that even in an idyllic beach town, there are women living with the deepest of secrets. Thus begins the Oysterville Sewing Circle, where women can join forces to support each other through the troubles they keep hidden. Yet just as Carolyn regains her creativity and fighting spirit, and the children begin to heal from their loss, an unexpected challenge tests her courage and her heart. This time, though, Carolyn is not going to run away. She's going to stand and fight for everything and everyone that she loves.
Hey, great. Thanks. I had the pleasure of listening to Sugar and Salt, which is set in San Francisco. It is not the first book that I've read by Susan, but I've enjoyed every one of them, and there was no difference here. Sugar and Salt is a tale of friendship, hardship, redemption, and love between a San Francisco baker, Jerome Barnes, and Margot Salton, a barbecue master from Texas. Jerome learned the art of baking at his grandmother's bakery, Sugar, located on historic Perdita Street in San Francisco, which supplies baked goods to the lost and found bookshop across the street. When the restaurant that he shares a commercial kitchen with loses its longtime tenant, Margot moves in. Margot isn't exactly on the run, but she needs a fresh start. She's taken care of herself her whole life, pulling herself up by her fingernails to recover from trauma, and her dream has been to open a restaurant somewhere far away from Texas. The shared kitchen with Jerome's Sugar Bakery is the perfect setup. A state-of-the-art kitchen in a vibrant neighborhood popular with tourists and locals, Margot instantly takes to Jerome's grandmother, the lively, opinionated Ida. The older woman proves to be a good mentor, and Margot is drawn to Jerome. Despite their different backgrounds, their attraction is powerful, and even though Jerome worries that Margot will simply move on from him once she's found some peace and stability, she doesn't. But that just when she starts to relax in a happy new future, Margot's past in Texas comes back to haunt her. And you have to find out the rest by reading the book.
All right, Michelle.
Tiffany, I love your room. It looks like you're surrounded by books.
I am. It is my library.
Oh, wow. That's very impressive. Makes me want to go snoop all along your shelves.
Well, thanks. There's a lot of gems in here.
Well, I decided to go to San Francisco for this one. At least my background. But I listened to the Lost and Found Bookshop, which is also set in San Francisco. And in this thought-provoking, wise, and emotionally rich novel, New York Times bestselling author, my favorite, Susan Wiggs, explores the meaning of happiness, trust, and faith in oneself as she asks the question, if you had to start over, what would you do and who would you be? There is a book for everything. Somewhere in the vast library of the universe, as Natalie thought of it, there was a book that embodied exactly the things she was worrying about. In the wake of a shocking tragedy, Natalie Harper inherits her mother's charming but financially strapped bookshop in San Francisco. She also becomes a caretaker for her ailing grandfather, Andrew, her only living relative, not counting her scoundrel father. But the gruff, deeply kind Andrew has begun displaying signs of decline. Natalie thinks it's best to move him to an assisted living facility to ensure the care he needs. To pay for it, she plans to close the bookstore and sell the derelict but valuable building on historic Perdita Street, which is in need of constant fixing. There's only one problem. Grandpa Andrew owns the building and refuses to sell. Natalie adores her grandfather. She'll do whatever it takes to make his final years happy. Besides, she loves the store and its books provide welcome solace for her overwhelming grief. After she moves into the small studio apartment above the shop, Natalie carries out her grandfather's request and hires a contractor, Peach Gallagher, to do the necessary and ongoing repairs. His young daughter, Dorothy, also becomes a regular at the store, and she and Natalie began reading together while Peach works. To Natalie's surprise, her sorrow begins to dissipate, and her life becomes an unexpected journey of new connections, discoveries, and revelations, from unearthing artifacts hidden in the bookshop's walls to discovering the truth about her family, her future, and her own heart. This book was truly, truly special to me as a book lover and a nurse. Everything just fit perfectly for me on this book. So thank you. Susan, for this
Thank
book.
you, Michelle.
Those were such great descriptions. I feel so excited to hear them all kind of placed together. I can tell that place and generations and family are really important to you, because those were things that really appeared in all of these books.
Yeah, that's true. When I hear them one after the other like that, I realize I do kind of have a one-track mind. I have, it's pretty clear to see what's on my mind. And I don't think that will ever change. And it doesn't really seem to change book to book, whether it's a historical romance or a workplace romance or, a trauma recovery book, but the themes always seem to go back to those basics. And it doesn't worry me, because there's a book that I really love by Stephen King called On Writing, and it's his writing memoir. I really recommend it to not just writers but readers as well, because it's such a well-told glimpse into a storyteller's mind. And one of the things in that book that resonated with me was that each writer keeps returning to the same themes over and over again, just dressing them up in different settings and time periods and characters. And I think that really resonated with me. So I'm sure Stephen King would appreciate my endorsement.
Well, and especially because those are things that matter to all of us. You see dressing them up, but really just making them accessible through life experience. We're all kind of looking for those same themes in the end, regardless of what our individual experiences are. Does anyone else have anything to add about the books? You've all given such a nice job recapping them. I feel like you should have a chance to add if there's something else you want to say about one of the other books or something like that.
I just feel that the genres are, you've got a bit of romance, then I've got a little bit of mystery, and it's just so tender. It's the perfect really books to get lost in. I've got a very stressful job, and I can't recommend enough Susan Wiggs novels to all my nurse friends and doctors too, but they're just so wonderful to read. It's just so comforting, and it's not just a singular one dimension. There's just so many things happening, and it's so exciting that I want to turn the pages and I want to find out more, and it keeps me going. So in that way, Susan Wiggs books are just not, multi-genre bending. I don't know how you say it, but it's just so wonderful for me.
Well, thank you.
I really
I
love
think
it.
it's really cool that you guys all heard the audiobook, because to be honest, after one of my books is published, I get the book in the mail, and I kind of pet it and appreciate the hard work and everything that went into it, but I never read it, because I just see all the flaws and all the warts and the things that I either struggled with or I wish that I would have changed or something like that. So what I do when a book is published is I clear my day, a couple of days, and listen to the audiobook, because it kind of turns it into a different art form, really. Voice talents just amaze me, the way that they can immerse you into the world of the story. And usually I forget, that I'm listening to a book that I wrote, and just because I'm more entertained by the performance of the voice talent. And so audiobooks are pretty important to me as a writer and also as a reader. I listen to a lot of audiobooks myself, just because it's a great way to multitask when you're doing something that's unfortunately, I can't do it while I'm writing, but gardening or walking the dog or driving somewhere or something like that. Those are my constant companions.
And just the way you write with all the descriptions, it makes for a really wonderful audiobook, because it does paint the picture in my head. So it's perfect audiobook, really.
Yeah, I think that my publisher, HarperCollins, has done a pretty good job matching the narrator with the text. Usually they send me like sample clips from, say, I don't know, 3 to 6 different artists. And I'll listen to the clips and try to see how that would pair with my text. And I'm not very good at it because I can't really evaluate a narration until I hear them do all the voices. But they're all so polished now, and they're all so they're not overly dramatic. They don't like intrude into the story, but they still keep you engaged with the story in a new way. So I'm really pleased with the way that the narrators came out. Probably my favorite audiobook that I've listened to that I wrote is probably Map of the Heart. Jill, you would like it. A lot of it takes place in South France. And I don't know, she kind of nailed the voices. And the other one that I was really proud of was Sugar and Salt.
Yes.
She was, I made a special request. I said, I lived in Texas before I moved to Washington years and years ago. And people from Texas, especially Houston and Austin, they don't have that twang that people usually associate with it. It's a little more subtle, and it's definitely regional. And so I asked them to find somebody who could sound like that without going over the top and, making it sound like a hillbilly novel or something like that. And I really loved her performance too. And she was good. And she did the Black voice as well, I thought. And so I was really pleased with that one too. But all of them have been great.
I was super impressed by the narrator for Sugar and Salt. And I've read audio or listened to audiobooks that I've had to put aside and then go pick up the book and read it, because in my head when I'm reading, I have an own voice for each of the characters. And so sometimes audiobooks can fall a little flat, but Sugar and Salt was very impressive. I did lose myself in the book. I forgot that I was listening to someone reading it to me. I felt like I was actually reading it, like I was there and involved. So for me, the audio really did stand out, and I included that in my review after listening to it. I also appreciate, one thing I appreciate about your book, Susan, is that they can each stand alone, but they kind of continue when you have your series, they continue in the series. So it is fun because I had read the Lost and Found Bookshop. So it was fun to like visit and, and you see, okay, they're on the same street. These are local businesses. It's somebody else's story, but you're kind of tied to what you've read in a past book. So I also appreciated that part. It's fun for people who like to read series, but maybe don't want to read a continuation of a book where you feel like you have a cliffhanger. Instead, you just want to explore the rest of the people that are in that area or connected to the story that you read.
Yeah, my editor calls those Easter eggs, where if somebody who's familiar with a previous book, like the Lost and Found Bookshop, I think in Sugar and Salt, they look across the street and she's there. And I think Peach and Natalie come to dinner at her restaurant. Little things like that don't really, you don't have to know that they exist in another world as well, but it's fun if you do. And I like that when I come across them too, as I'm reading.
Yeah, it's a great thing as a reader. I enjoy it.
Makes you feel like an insider.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, and
I
think your review where you mentioned the narrator and Sugar and Salt, I think I forwarded that to the publisher, because I don't ever get to talk to my narrators, but I try to, if they're on social media, I try to follow them or something like that. But I like to share feedback like that, especially nice feedback. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Share
because that's not an easy task. I mean, I can't imagine just trying to read a synopsis or tell someone, about a book, and you can spill over your words, but to read an entire book through audio, I mean, it's very impressive, especially when it's really well done.
I know. Well, and it takes a lot more stamina than you think. And I found that out because when I write my first draft, I just write it in longhand in notebooks. I just scribble in notebooks. And so, and that's the only draft. So what I try to do is I try to type it up as quickly as I can. So if the house burns down or something like that, I haven't burned my whole book. Anyway, so I used to type it up. I hate typing. It's just so tedious to me. And so now I just dictate it with voice dictation, either in my phone or, however, and then, it appears as a WordPerfect document. And so I get really fatigued after about 10,000 words. That's like 40 printed pages, I would say. It gets old quick. And so I appreciate the work that they put into, producing that. I only wish I could write that fast though.
You kind of need tips too for like the throat. I'm sure, whenever you've had like a long day of meetings or constantly, Michelle, when you're probably constantly talking to patients, like your throat gets worn out and sore, and you kind of have to rest that as well, or else it changes your voice, so there's a lot I think that goes into it that is just really impressive.
Well, the next book that I have coming out, it's going to be narrated by somebody named Brittany Presley, and with 2 S's, not like Elvis Presley. And she just won a real big award. I wish I could remember the name of the award. So I'm very excited to hear her performance, because I've not had her read one of my books before. So I'm excited to hear that one too.
It really does make an essential partner for you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, does anyone want to talk a little bit about wine as we bring that around to the books? So
Absolutely.
we've already got the introduction. I went ahead and thought we should start with the decoy. So this sparkling wine, and just the background a little bit on decoy. They're all of these are part of what is called the Duckhorn portfolio, and Duckhorn Vineyard is just an iconic vineyard. It's very well-known set of vineyards, actually, and line of wines, and they have a portfolio of some really awesome brands. And so we've got 3 here today from 3 different places, which I think is a really good fit for the books, because they also bring that sense of place. And in wine, we call it terroir. Where it comes from is important, and otherwise it wouldn't be what it is. It just sustains itself. So the first one that I thought we'd pair with was this sparkling wine with sugar and salt. And the reason was it's something that could go really nice with dessert. In fact, I had someone drop off a tres leche cake, and it's in the fridge right now. And I thought, nice.
That sounds
Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone, so ladies, do you all have this wine with you, or is it just Susan that's got the wine in front of her?
I have
We've tasted, but I no longer have the bottles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that problem.
Yeah.
One thing about savoring the top is that you just have to drink the whole bottle. So
you got to drink
Jerry and I are tonight.
But if you tasted it and you want to shout out your thoughts about pairing, feel free. If there was something that you ate with it, if you've already tasted it and you paired it with a meal, we'd love to hear kind of what you did with it. If you were reading or doing something else to pass your time, feel free to share what you think this wine would be really nice with. So again, it's the Decoy Brut Cuvée sparkling wine. It's made the same way that champagne is made, which is interesting. It's got the exact same method, and in fact, the same type of grapes, but they're from California, all over California. And the winemaker is Dana Epperson. So it's always nice to know the people behind the wine. These people work really, really hard. So that's just a little bit of a background about it. And for me, I just thought it was really balanced, nice and dry with floral aromatics, some orchard fruit. I kind of think anybody would like this wine. I'm pretty sure it's a crowd pleaser. So if, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I know. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, go ahead. I want to hear what Tiffany said.
I know I enjoyed it, and I'm pretty picky with anything along that line, whether it's a champagne or a brut. I love red wine. I don't typically like white wine, so for me, it's always, ooh, how am I going to feel about this? But I thought it was nice and crisp. I thought it had a very light but really nice flavor on my palate. Each of these wines I would go and purchase on my own. Like I really enjoyed them. Yeah, it was really nice. It wasn't overpowering in any way. It made me want to take an additional sip each time. I think there's a lot of things that it could pair with, but I'm really wanting your tres leche cake.
That sounds amazing. No, but we're in the pre-dinner hour, and so I'm thinking about something like oysters. We get amazing oysters in far western Washington. In fact, the Oysterville Sewing Circle was Oysterville's a real place, and they really, the whole town exists for the oysters. And so this would be amazing with that, but I don't know. I'd like what you said about dessert too. I usually think about cracking the bubbly first. I'm not sure why, if it's traditional or what, but we have a sommelier in the family. My niece Joelle from Austin, Texas, is a sommelier down there, and she is very knowledgeable. And she was so impressed by these 3 bottles. I sent her a shot of the 3 bottles. She was really, really. She was like, "I'm so happy for you."
Yeah, and what I looked up the retail price on this. Would you believe it's from the winery? It's $25.
Oh,
I think it's a great price for this.
that is a really good price.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's kind of like an affordable luxury, I think, in a lot of ways. It's super versatile. The fact that it could be an apero before dinner, you could have this with dinner. You could easily have this with a lot of foods and to drink a little bit after. It's really, really well-rounded wine.
Mm-hmm.
So for Lost and Found Bookshop, my thoughts were to use a California wine. So 2 of these wines were California. So I picked the Calera Pinot Noir from the Central Coast. It's this guy. This brand is known for their single vineyard wines. They've got some really impressive. If you get a chance to look them up and see some of their single vineyard work, it's really interesting. But I chose the Central Coast, which is kind of a snapshot of the whole area. So it's got some history here. This Calera was founded in the 70s, the mid 70s, and kind of a pioneer by the name of Josh Jensen. So I think Jensen's another name in your books as well. Don't you have a character with that name?
Yeah, my best friend growing up, she actually runs the tasting room for Brown Winery out here in Washington. You're probably familiar. Kirsten Jensen, and we were schoolgirls together in Waterloo, Belgium. So we go way back.
Way back.
Yeah. Way
back. The winemaker now, so that was kind of the original founder. The winemaker now, his name is Mike Waller. And these guys partner with some really great vineyards. They have their own vineyards and do some partnerships. So this is 100% Pinot Noir. And I had the 2021, and this was one of the latest Central Coast harvest on record, which I thought maybe put us in a little bit of time and place thinking about what it was like when they were preparing this wine and bringing it in. So I thought that this would be a great pairing for Lost and Found Bookshop. And then when I was thinking about food, for me, it's got kind of like that dark and red fruit blend, a little savory herbal, nice and balanced. I was thinking mushroom dishes would be really good with this one.
That's interesting you said that, because I cannot tell a lie. I already drank the Calera because we had a patio party last week for my birthday, and we had a guy come with his pizza oven, mobile pizza oven, and he was making these incredible mushroom pizzas with arugula and mushrooms on it, and we had it with that. So,
perfect.
Yeah,
that sounds really good.
Yeah, it was delicious.
The person came and made the pizzas at your house?
Yeah, he had a trailer with his pizza oven on the back of it. So he was just making pizzas on my driveway, and we were drinking wine and doing birthday stuff. It was fun.
Kind of feels like there could be a story there.
Yeah. Well, it was my 65th, and so I thought, well, that's a significant birthday. I don't know if it's good or bad, but here I am. And so everybody had to make a self-portrait. If you subscribe to my author newsletter, I put our pictures in there of our self-portrait. You had to hold the mirror and do a blind self-portrait where you can't see what your hand's doing. So you're looking in the mirror and your hand is covered. And it's amazing. People come up with things that look like Picasso's. Wow. And so it's kind of a very revealing exercise. So we did that. We did Jenga. We did yard darts. And here on Bainbridge, does anybody play pickleball? The new Vogue sport. It's called pickleball. It's kind of like a cross between tennis and ping pong, really. And it took off during COVID, but it was invented just at a house down the street from me on Bainbridge Island. Just a little bit of trivia there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, my sister is all about pickleball now, and she's a young woman who plays with these 70-year-olds, and she just
Music
loves
sport,
it.
yes.
Yeah,
That.
loves it. But talking about mushrooms, I did also did a mushroom dish that paired with my Calera Pinot, and I did a risotto.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so good. So I got this. We just came back from Italy in the summer, and I got a little arborio rice, and I was like, I want to use it. So I did that with with this one, and it was perfect. Perfect.
That sounds fantastic.
I know Pinot's like you want to eat it with like meat, right? But we had like that mushroom, and it did feel like it's meaty, and it was great in the palate. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that umami is so good with, like this, because there's
That
plenty
is
of
the
flavor.
word.
Mhm.
Uh-huh. And I was reading something about, the location in Central California. I'm from Southern California. I'm in Los Angeles, well, actually Pasadena. But I was reading that it had like the flavor because of the location of that Central Valley that gives it that spice in that wine. So interesting.
Yeah, it's a really cool growing region that gets interesting wind patterns and lots of complex soil, and you could keep yourself busy drinking Central Coast Pinot Noir forever. And many people realize that, many people think that the Central Coast of California has got some of the finest Pinot Noir in North America. There's some really cool stuff coming out there. We are now for our third wine, so the timing is really great to go to a place that I know is really important to Susan, Washington. So the third wine that we're tasting is from Canvasback, and this is the Red Mountain Cabernet Sauvignon. And Red Mountain is one of the coolest places for growing wine. It's also naturally beautiful. So this is a pretty interesting wine. I was really happy to get a chance to try this one. This comes from again, the Duckhorn portfolio, and it's kind of that special spot, part of Washington State wines, which are getting a lot of attention these days. There's just really exciting things going on all across different parts of the state. Walla Walla and the tasting rooms in Woodinville. And I'm sure Susan could say plenty of nice things about what's happening there. The winemaker for this is a guy named Brian Rudin, and there is also a vineyard manager whose name is Dick Boucher. So they work together to kind of cultivate this wine. So one interesting fact is, so it's a Cabernet Sauvignon, and you all might know this, but a lot of people are surprised to hear that in most parts of the United States, you can put a single vineyard, or a single variety on the wine, as long as there's 75% of that in there. And then it could have a little bit of seasoning from other grapes, as long as 75% of it is what it says on the label. So in this case, it has a little bit of Merlot, Petit Verdot, Syrah, and Malbec. So I thought that was kind of interesting and lends some complexity, which is a really great thing in a wine like this, because I picked up a lot of saturated red fruit, a little bit of like maybe nutty or candied complexity, a lot of layers. This was also aged in oak, which I think you can kind of feel with the way that it comes through on the palate. And this is a really nice wine. I think this is kind of something elevated to share over a nice meal. Aged cheeses, I'm thinking, grilled skirt steak, something like that. So I have a feeling that a lot of you probably like this wine. A lot of people that I know would love this wine. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it.
This one was my favorite. I absolutely loved it. I ate it with a charcuterie board because wine and cheese always never fails. But yeah, this one I absolutely loved. It's interesting that you say that, the wine has to have at least 70% to be classified, because it was a little bit reminiscent of a red blend, not fully, because I mean, a red blend would have a bigger mix. But it kind of reminded me of it. I really like red blends. And so it reminded me of that. It was definitely not a harsh cab. So yeah, it was super smooth, very tasty. It was just the one that I finished first because I kept wanting more.
Oh, well, now I'm looking forward to tomorrow. I can't have two open bottles at once, but yeah, that was a really nice review, Tiffany. Are you a wine? Do you just are you a hobbyist, or you just appreciate good wine, or?
Yeah, it's just one of the drinks that I like. I'm also in marketing, so it might come a little bit natural.
You watch out, or one of the wine companies will hire you. This is also, I looked up the price for this one. It's $44, which I think is a nice price. It's something that you could give as a gift, or take to kind of impress some guests, but it's still with achievable range. It's not one of those that's just way too expensive to buy or open. So I thought it was really nice too. I'm excited to share this with a couple people now that it's open.
The labels were all nice too. So it really made for a nice Instagram post with all of these labels. So the designers for the wineries did a great job too.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it's like books. The label really has nothing to do with how it tastes, just like a book cover has nothing to do with the author at all. And yet you can sink or swim based on, a book cover, or maybe I don't know if it's the same, but I have a feeling a really unappealing or routine, just plain wine label just might not do it justice. And so as a writer, you always hope you never see your cover until you finish the book and given it to your publisher. And so I always kind of hold my breath waiting. And actually the Oysterville Sewing Circle cover had a lot of different iterations, and the book previous to that, which is one of my favorite books that I ever wrote, it was called Between You and Me. They changed my title, and they changed the cover art so many times, and the editor who was supposed to be in charge of editing it moved on to do other things, and the editor that I now have was on maternity leave, so I didn't really have anybody at the publisher. And so they put a pretty not very appealing piece of stock art on it, and the sales were pretty telling, pretty abysmal on that book. So hopefully when they finally get rid of the current inventory on that one, they will repackage it in some kind of sexy, cool looking cover, and it'll get a second chance at life.
Yeah, they say that people make a visual decision within milliseconds, a fraction of a second. So it all matters. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm as guilty as the next person. You scan something, and when we were going through the different options for the Oysterville Sewing Circle, the hardcover option with the red spool of thread, I think that was on the audiobook. That was pretty much everybody's clear favorite, except for the buyer for Walmart. And they said it looked too cold and corporate or something like that, and they wanted it to be warm and can we have a beach scene or something like that. So if you look at the paperback edition of the Oysterville Sewing Circle, they're a lot sweeter. They're a lot more, I don't know, I guess warm and fuzzy. But so I thought that was a interesting, as somebody in marketing, Tiffany, you're probably thinking, you got to talk to your customer.
Yeah, you do. And I mean, you have to uphold your brand too. So whether it's books or wine, like in the case of Duckhorn and each of these wines, you can clearly see their brand throughout, whether it's a name of the wine or what's pictured on the wine, like it all very nicely ties together. So it's on this kind of underlying thought to make you think of Duckhorn when you're looking or purchasing or drinking the bottle. And then with books, there's a brand there too. Your story is within the pages, and you want the cover to reflect the story and to show who you are as an author. But you also want it to be appealing because, quite honestly, whether you walk in the book aisle or in the wine aisle, you have 1,000,001 choices in front of you, and it can be really overwhelming, especially if you don't really know what you're looking for. And so a lot of people, maybe not that they hopefully aren't judging the book by the cover, but it's going to be what attracts them to pick up the book. And then hopefully they'll flip it over and read the synopsis or turn inside and read a couple pages to get a flavor of the author's writing, or however it is that people decide. Hopefully not just the cover. But we're visual is one of our five senses. So, I mean, we have to be able to be attracted to something.
Well, I take wine recommendations the way I do book recommendations. For me, the most powerful is word of mouth. And
Exactly.
so that's what Jill is doing is of such interest to me, because she's directing me. There are so many choices of wine and books. You know, you kind of rely on your friends and people in the industry and reviewers and writers to kind of steer you right. And I have to say, my career has been saved multiple times by readers and librarians. They are the people who are vocal about books and talk about them and send you a text going, oh, you must read that, or, you know, things like that. Those matter more than well, maybe not more than TikTok. I've heard that TikTok is like the new standard for going viral on a book, but oh boy.
I'm not on TikTok, so I don't know.
Well, in a lot of ways, I think that kind of works the same, because it's really just hearing somebody say, hey, I just discovered this and it's great. And so it's a little bit of a more direct, instant, face-to-face word of mouth, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think my
favorite.
Yeah, no, my favorite thing to hear, well, not my favorite, but one of the things I love to hear from readers is I hear from somebody going, I've never read one of your books before, but I just read this one. Do you have any other ones? And I feel so validated. I'm like, I've had a few. My first book was published in 1987, before y'all were born. And I published, like a book every year since that, book or two every year since then. And so it's always, and I love it when I discover a new to me writer, and it turns out, you know, she has this entire awesome backlist.
It's great. It's I can tell that your readers that you've had here, or your listeners, if you so to say, are fans for life, it sounds like. You know, I think we can probably wrap up. We have been chatting for about an hour, and it's been like that. This has been so much fun. So if anybody has anything they really need to add, we're just kind of wrapping up the pairing pages discussion, and then I can tell you where to find everybody if you want to follow up. And if the readers want to share their Instagram or something where they share your reviews, feel free to kind of let us know how people can keep in touch with you.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah. I have nothing to add. This was this was the funnest hour of my day. So thank you so much for including me, for listening to the books. And yeah, definitely stay in touch. You can always find me at Susan Wiggs or Susan _ whatever online. And I so appreciate everything you do. And yeah, thank you for everything, you guys.
Thank you, Susan. This was fantastic. So much fun. So you can follow Tandem Collective at Tandem Collective Global. I believe that there's a UK page too on Instagram, but that's the one for all of us that are outside of the UK. And Duckhorn Wine is on Instagram. And then you can also see, if you have a minute to check them out online and check out the whole portfolio, that's where you'll find more details about the brands that aren't necessarily called Duckhorn, but they're part of the same family. So I really encourage you to kind of dig in and see what else there is that you like. If you want to find me, I'm at Jill Barth. I've got it right on there on Instagram, and my website is jillbarth.com. So I'm easy to find.
Okay, you guys. Well, you have a good rest of your evening, and cheers to everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers. Y'all take care.
Have a good night.